Okay, thank you all, and thank you, Monica, for that. Can you put it up a little bit? Introduction, and be counting on you to keep a 25-minute call for my talk, even though my talk is on hidden lands, where the whole point is to go from time to timelessness. But under the current circumstances, we're bridging worlds rather than leaving one for another. So what I'd like to do in this talk, the paper will be far more extensive, looking at tantric geography in this larger sense, from its transformation from the 24 Shakti Pitas of the Indian Vajrayana tradition into the hidden land or Bayu tradition of Bhutan and Tibet. But what I'd like to do in this talk, therefore, is to focus a little bit more on the Bayu, on the hidden lands. So, there we go. So, when we talk about hidden lands, or Bayu, what we're looking at is a tradition evolving out of Mahayana Buddhism, of Buddha fields, of the zhing, as it would be called in Tibetan. This here, of course, is the Sukhavati, the Dewachen, the Buddha field of infinite bliss, lorded over by Akshobhya, who you see here. And meditations in the Mahayana tradition were about reaching Buddha fields through either dream, through vision, after death, or through various forms of meditation. The point being that once in a Buddha field, many of our difficulties in this life would be removed, and our chances for enlightenment would be much more imminent. So, in this regard, we will speak about the hidden lands, which are spread across. Sorry, this slide, I have to apologize in case we converted it from a keynote to a PowerPoint, so some things may appear, as I'm seeing here, in a slightly different order. So what we'll do is actually go to the next slide, and this is the mandala of Hevajra. So when we move from the Mahayana to the Vajrayana tradition, we begin to see not only Buddha fields, but we begin to see mandalas of practice. We begin to see ways in which we enter not just into a Buddha field in a transcendent sense, but in an immanent sense in terms of how we engage with life, as some of our speakers spoke about yesterday, this idea of embracing the world, embracing our sensuous, incarnate existence rather than renouncing it. And that's, of course, very vividly displayed in tantric mandalas, in this case of Hevajra. So all of these tantric mandalas, as all of you are probably aware, are surrounded by charnel grounds. And we'll have a speaker later in this panel who'll be speaking about charnel grounds as optimal places of practice because they invoke both awe and terror as well as bliss. And this extraordinary conjunction that the Bayu tradition also represents in representing, you could say, to use the English term, a sublime landscape in which terror and awe are in equal proportions. And we see, for example, in the Kala Chakra tradition, there was a enumeration of 24 sacred sites distributed throughout the Indian subcontinent, but also, as we learned yesterday in one of the presentations, throughout the body. So this idea that that is what is without is also within. And so the journeys to these sacred places, to power places and to hidden lands, is about breaking down, going through that veil by which we habitually distinguish the external reality from internal reality and recognizing the non-dual dimension. So here we see Chakrasamvara in union with Vajravarahi, who will become important in this talk in that her terrestrial body, her earthly body, is represented in the hidden land of Bayu Pemaku, the hidden land arrayed like lotuses. So if we look historically in the evolution of Vajrayana Buddhism in India, we can begin to see how chakras were manifested architecturally throughout the landscape. These were yogini mandala shrines, and we can see the yogini mandala, kind of an aerial view of Vajrayogini on the lower right, and then 3 different temples in India in which were dedicated to the 64 yoginis. And as was introduced with Bhubaneswari, essentially, in one form or another, representing that space in which all other yoginis manifest. But as we see here in a 13th century Tibetan manuscript, all that we see without these chakras, these places of initiation and practice, are also represented within our physical body. We see many instances in this case, Bhutanese art, Tibetan art, Himalayan art, of practitioners in nature This was very important. If we look at the Buddha's life story itself, he left his palace to go into the wilderness, into the forest, to reach enlightenment. So we begin to see how important nature was in that iteration. We also see Padmasambhava here in union with his consort in the hidden land, essentially the legendary land of Udayana. Urgyen Rinpoche, the great precious teacher from the land of Udayana, in which his teaching spread throughout the Himalayan region. We see here Guru Rinpoche's paradise at the copper-colored mountain, again a geographical representation of a state of mind, a state of consciousness, a state of possibility. And we see how that's recapitulated in the Kalashakra Tantra in depictions of Shambhala, the legendary kingdom from which a new era will emerge, as we heard from Khenpo Rinpoche yesterday. So what I want to speak about, I will ask for a 5-minute warning from the moderator so that I know how quickly to go at some point. I want to talk about how the hidden land tradition began to evolve, in this case in Terdrum, the place of treasures, of spiritual treasures in central Tibet, where Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal spent years practicing together. This is the enlightenment cave of Yeshe Tsogyal, called the Kando Tsokpo Kiryongzon, about 18,000 feet high. This is also a lama from Nangchen who was practicing there, an extraordinary place which is still held to be full of treasures, and where the first teachings, as recorded by Yeshe Tsogyal, about hidden lands emerged from. But we also see in Bhutan, for example, with Yeshe Tsogyal's own life story, about places in nature perched on the edges of cliffs in which practice was considered to be more efficacious than it would be in any other circumstances. We see also Vajrayogini, for example, or Dorjipamo, represented here in a wall painting with a cave, a tunnel as it were, a portal into another world, or into that dimension in which the outer and the inner and the secret are all inseparable. We see that capitulated, for example, at Chumpukne, which is considered a Beul, a hidden land, north of Paro, where a great statue, as you know from the 8th century, was revealed of Vajrayogini, enshrined in the central temple, and said to have been growing from the size of a small child to its current adult size, revealed from 3 images, but one of which was revealed from this cave behind this waterfall. So all of this represents Vajrayogini, Bhubaneswari, the goddess, the female principle in varying forms, surrounded by a mandala, and a mandala surrounded by charnel grounds. Charnel grounds representing, again, that mixture of awe and terror that brings us into a state of vivid presence. We see this is the condition that's necessary for treasures to be revealed. And the texts describing hidden lands were in fact revealed, either as we see here, a Buddha being revealed from the rock, but often the text, the guidebooks, the naik to the hidden lands. I spent years trying to track down many of these texts, the naik describing hidden lands, and fascinating descriptions. It's too small on my screen to be able to read what it says there. But if you read that, this is the outer pass key to the hidden lands. And it's an extraordinary text that was revealed in the 14th century by Rigsen Godenchen, the outer pass key to the hidden lands. And again, because it's too small to read it, I'm just going to move. I will try to paraphrase it from my memory. Those who contemplate going to the hidden lands but actually don't actually go will fall victim to their own imagination, and the hidden lands will never be revealed as a result of that. I may ask for the next time we have quotes, maybe Monica, for you to read that for me, because it's a very beautiful phrasing. And I'm not sure why it's making these digital transitions. But in any case, I was fascinated by these accounts of how hidden lands were revealed. We see on the left, for example, a Dakini, a protector above a waterfall who guides a Teratan, a treasure revealer, to a particular text, and the varying ways in which these texts then guided these great Teratans, treasure revealers, to different kinds of practices, different kinds of and to places in which those practices could be most efficacious. From the Western tradition, I wanted to talk a little of a quote that I found from Simon Schama in his book Landscape and Memory that to me speaks deeply about the quality of what a bayou represents as opposed to what we might consider an ordinary landscape. And what Simon Schama writes is that there have always been two, and I'm doing it partly from memory, there have always been two kinds of Arcadia, shaggy and smooth, dark and light, a place of bucolic leisure and a place of primitive panic, the idyllic as well as the wild. So here we see an image, a kind of proto-image of what would almost appear to be Dorje Drolo. And this is sort of the idea, the spirit in which one enters into the hidden lands is not necessarily to tame the mind, of course it is on one level, but it's also to rewild the mind. In other words, to let our consciousness free it from the habitual patterns that we've adopted and adapted unconsciously from our engagement with the social world, from samsara, to the organic, natural ecosystem of our own body-minds. So when I was interested in hidden lands, I went to my teacher, Chato Rinpoche. Actually, before he became formally my teacher, he was a great Lama who was known to have spent a lot of time in caves, high mountains. This was when I was in my early 20s. And I asked him to tell me about hidden lands. And he just looked at me quite a while without saying anything. He said, "Can you spend a month alone?" And I said, "Yes, Rinpoche, if that was..." He goes, "Okay, we'll come back when you have a month alone and I'll send you to a bayou. Stay there for a month, and then when you come out, you will know what a bayou is. You won't have to ask me." So that was the beginning of my relationship, my apprenticeship in a certain sense, and a deep and profound relationship with my teacher, who kind of introduced me to this and sent me for 2 days to this bayou of Yomo, Yomo Kangri, in Nepal, north of the Kathmandu Valley that you see on the left, in a hidden part of Yomo called Pematang. So this led to ongoing journeys to other hidden lands. Actually, Chato Rinpoche made a long and beautiful calligraphy list of the hidden lands he said I should now go to. Some of those were in Tibet, some in Nepal. These are practitioners in Terdrum. These were Lopas, or Idu Mishni, community in Lower Pemaka, in what's now Arunachal Pradesh, following kind of these guide books into the outer, inner, and secret dimensions of the hidden lands. I also met during this time with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who wrote the introduction to a book called The Heart of the World that some of you may be familiar with, which was about my investigation, both textually and on the ground, in regard to the hidden lands. So what His Holiness wrote about hidden lands, and again, I'm going to sort of peer down here so I can read, hopefully, it says, hidden lands are not places to escape the world, but to enter it more deeply. The qualities, the qualities inherent in such sacred places reveal the interconnectedness of all life and deepen awareness of the hidden regions of the mind and spirit. Visiting such places with a good motivation and appropriate merit, the pilgrim can learn to see the world differently from the way it commonly appears. So these are examples of hidden lands. This is the hidden land of Kimalung in Nepal, in the Manaslu region. I'm going to move a little quickly just because I think time is limited. This is the entry portal through a Chorten into the hidden land of Kimalung, where I did a long retreat. And this is from Gokyori in Nepal, which is also the region of Khumbu, near Everest, which was also, according to the textual tradition, a hidden land. But what I want to focus on today is what's generally considered the greatest of the hidden lands, which is Pemaku, the hidden land arrayed like lotuses at the eastern edge of the Himalayan range, where the Tsangpo River bends around the range of Namche Barwa, which we see here, the blazing mountain, and enters into a gorge recognized as the world's deepest. You can see it here on the map in the northeast kind of corner of Arunachal Pradesh. It's also the place where the Tsangpo River reaches its northernmost apex and bends around this mountain called Abu Lashu, which is the protector deity for Pemaku in this northern section. So you can see here a landscape, a topography, a nature very different from the Tibetan plateau as a whole. So we saw this was a text revealed by Padmasambhava as written down by Yeshe Tsogyal, We see the incredible mountains depicted in his own homeland of Urgin, or Udiana. And we see the peak of Gyalapelri, which represents the northernmost edge, if you will, of Pemaka itself. And as I mentioned, all of Pemaka is considered to be the terrestrial or earthly body of Dorje Pamo, Vajravarahi, which of course is the meditational support or the deity support for many completion stage practices. So if we look through one of Padmasambhava's texts, the Naik's, called Liberation Through Hearing of the Great Blissful Land of Pemaka, he writes, just by hearing about the great blissful Buddha realm of Pemaka opens the path to enlightenment. There is no need to mention the benefit of actually going there. So this became for me, an ongoing quest to travel through Pemaka. I went yearly. Went about 12 times in the end. So this is the satellite image of this great bend of the Tsangpo as one enters into this hidden land, which is also on a level of pure topography and geography, an extraordinary part of the planet, where vegetation varies from the tropical to the Arctic in very short distances. This is a map of Pemaka that I made. And this is, again, the mountain Gyalapelri, which is held not only to be the northernmost point of Pemaka, but it's meant to represent in the terrestrial body of Dorje Pamo the crown chakra. As we know with Dorje Pamo, Vajravarahi, there's a sow head that merges out of the right side of her head, and you can see that same configuration in this snow cornice at the top of Gyalapelri. So this is all the way through Pemaka. You're moving through the body of Vajravarahi. So it's an initiatory journey that the pilgrim takes. And so when one moves through the chakras of the landscape, those same chakras are simultaneously opening within our own innermost anatomy, as long as we have the pure vision, the danang, in which we can actually see our environment, not through the hardship that it might represent on an external level, but through that kind of exalted experience of even when there is fear, that we experience it as exaltation. So this is the Tsangpo as it's moving down now south from Gyalapelri in towards the region of the heart. This is a yogini from Teradrum who had spent 9 years in cave retreat, who I've had the great fortune to travel with, Ani Riksang, on 2 occasions in Pemaka. This is looking into the inner gorge that one follows as one moves down, ultimately down across the border into Arunachal Pradesh. This is Lower Pemaka, as it's called, which is essentially Dorje Pamo below the belt. And this is some of the areas that were settled in this valley called Yangsang Chu, which is the uterine channel of the goddess as it comes out from a nexus of sacred peaks at the headwaters of the Yangsang Chu River. So this lower part of Pemaka was opened later than Upper Pemaka by Urgin Dorje Dranak, and he wrote in the 19th century a kind of ode to Pemaka. Ho, the secret land of Pemaka, a pure realm of the Buddhas of past, present, and future. Just thinking of this place, I become joyful. Crystal glaciers adorn the sky, rain falls like nectar from the clouds, and rainbows fill the valleys, walled round by snow peaks, cliffs, and jungle. This hidden land of Padmasambhava is a place where fortunate beings can find enlightenment. So this gives us a wonderful sense of the possibilities of what the Bayu represents as a place of practice. I'm just going to ask our tech person if there's a way to enlarge the image here on the screen so I can read it, because it's kind of in micro form at the moment. But I'm just going to move. Okay, if you can all... Here, this will be easier. And this is, Lelung Shepi Dorje was an extraordinary Lama from the 18th century in Tibet, who wrote his own delightful true stories of the hidden land of Pemaka based upon his journey there in 1729. He said there's a constant menace here from poisonous snakes, leeches, flies, clawed and long-snouted animals with fangs, and dangerous wild men and vicious savages. One can easily succumb to fever and gout, while blisters, abscesses, ulcers, and sores add to the physical obstacles. Those without courage or those with lingering doubts, too many mental conceptions, who are strongly attached to conventional appearances, who are out of ignorance fall into accepting and rejecting. Such people will have difficulty reaching this land and getting through unscathed. So it's again a wonderful sense of how one needs to kind of be in the right mindset for Pamukka to be the place that it is evoked in the text. So here are the wonderful Idu Mishmi people who were my hosts in Lower Pamukka. And again, I'm going to move a little bit fast here, but certainly what the text describes is absolutely evident. One of the largest densities of Himalayan pit vipers anywhere in the world. So it keeps one remains mindful by necessity. Also an extraordinary range of medicinal and psychoactive plants. This is Amshi Sherab Barma on the lower left, who some of you may know here. We went on 3 expeditions into Lower Pamukka seeking Sakuntu Zampo and 4 other magical siddhi-producing plants described in 2 of the Naiks of Padmasambhava. But we see how the whole region is held to be kind of emanations of the great goddess, if you will, Dorje Palmo. We see also local women described as being dakinis. Also a poisoning cult that exists there. These are women from the Adi tribe who actually were porters. So an incredible sort of group with very egalitarian values who were with us for almost a month on our journey. And again, one of them collecting medicinal plants. So an incredible, beautiful area of Lower Pamukka, and I wanted to emphasize that because I know a lot of Bhutanese are now traveling to Lower Pamukka in Arunachal Pradesh these days, and whereas Upper Pamukka in Tibet has been completely closed off for years. And part of that is geographical. We see Namche Barwa in the background. We see intervening ridges that make this area extraordinarily difficult to get into, even if there weren't the prohibitions by the Chinese government at this point. We also see these incredible valleys filled with clouds. We see these gorges. This is a lama from Nepal that we traveled with. We tried to go in this way through the gorge, but as you can see, not possible. Extraordinary remote temples, Lakang in Pamukka, that we see here in a place called Marpung, the abbot of Marpung. We see again Namche Barwa, and the ridge that you see in the middle is going off to the right to the summit of Galapelri. And so it's that from the summit of Galapelri to the summit of Namche Barwa that forms the world's deepest gorge. Just to give a few, can I ask how much time I have left?
3 minutes, but I did read your bio, so you get another 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to take 6. So just to give a sense of what makes Pamukka such an amazing realm to travel in is this sense of the living nature, the deified nature of the landscape. So here we have Dorje Dragsen riding on what looks, like a Himalayan python, who is the protector deity of the innermost gorge that you can see here on the right. So rituals have to be, this is the outer gate into Pamukka, rituals have to be performed with a lashing, a life stick, which you carve for one notch of your life, and you place it here before you enter the gorge. Put your ear to a hole in the cliff to listen to the prophecies of the Dakinis, and with the hope that if you make it through unscathed, here you can see, they're not really trails sometimes. These are notched logs with just a bamboo kind of pole going up moss-covered cliffs. In other places, they're just notched logs like this going across kind of great abysses and gulfs. Other areas where it disappears together, and just making our way down through this cliff, following an extraordinary text. And this is again Lelung Shetty Dorje, who goes, when journeying to these sacred places, fear naturally transforms into great splendor, and one remains perfectly at ease. A new spiritual awareness flares up in one's stream of consciousness, a conception-free unity of bliss and emptiness. So this is the sense of pilgrimage in the context of a kind of Dzogchen view as one enters into the hidden lands as a support for practice, not in a formal sense of sitting, but actually just moving through and recognizing the waves of thoughts and emotions that arise. The passes one crosses, the rivers one crosses, the plants, the snakes one encounters are all part of that engagement with this extraordinary landscape here as we see it flowing now southward towards India, with remote communities that have settled here over centuries since the first text describing Pamukka as a hidden land first appeared, bathing naked in waterfalls, an incredible place of primal unity with nature. This is the outer gate, the inner gate. And I'll go quickly through this. It might take a couple minutes more. This is Bakatuka Rinpoche, who, according to the text, guided us to this the hidden land, the sacred mountain of Kundudor Senpochang, the citadel of Vajrasattva that lies in Vajrayogini's Vajravarahi's heart. This is crossing over the pass from Pomi, where Bakatuku is from, into Upper Pemaku. You can see the kind of landscape that one's moving across through snow passes, sometimes over rivers on cables or on ropes, and in other cases just crossing over one pass after another. We were traveling with a Lama from Kham. This was his attendant, sometimes through high-altitude marshes, Adratang, as you see here, as we approach the peak, which you can see here, of Kundudor Senpochang, surrounded by 8 lakes representing the Kagye mandala in the Nyingma tradition. Here we see Kundudor Senpochang and the Latso, or the Holy Lake, at its base. We also see the very distinctive anvil-like summit, and this is a place where, as it's said in the text, the most fortunate beings will see the deities directly, in this case, Vajrasattva in union with, and others, ordinary beings, will see only earth and rock. So this is where Photoshop comes to the rescue. But very quickly now, this was with who we were traveling with. This is looking for the key that would then allow us to enter into the secret gate of Pemaku. Of course, Kurukule on the left, which is the way in which Vajrayogini is said to appear here. This is arriving at the naval center of Vajravarahi, the temple of Rinchen, surrounded in a bowl of verdant nature. 2 rainbows appeared over the temple as we arrived. This is, of course, the wrathful form of Padmasambhava, Guru Drakpo, or as Chatur Rinpoche refers to it, as Rangrik Gyalpo, the monarch of self-arising awareness. Again, this is the naval center of Dorje Pamo. We cross out over a high pass, back into northern. And then this is the gate. I've already gone over time?
Just by 2 minutes. So
Okay. Okay. Just go quickly through the secret gate. This is entering into the innermost gorge, which is said to be a portal leading into what's called Yangsang Pemako, or innermost secret Pemako. The takin, which of course all of you in Bhutan know well, is also an animal that's very, very prevalent in this area, strangely said to be able to guide one into the hidden innermost sections of Pemaku. Here we see takin up close. This is we made several journeys into this area trying to get into this area according to the text, back into this great apex of the gorge. Sometimes, as I said, this is having to cross a cable across the Tsangpo. And then other times we had to use caving ladders and rappel down cliffs, trying to get up into the area in which the innermost portal was said to be. We weren't always able to proceed, performing rituals chud on the way in order to appease whatever deities we may have offended. Again, these are images of the several attempts that I made to reach Yangsang Pemaku following the texts, in this case a Lama from Kham, who was based there providing those texts, telling us where the 3 waterfalls were and how one has to enter into the third, that there would be a tunnel behind the third one that would actually be the gateway in. So there's a lot to be said about each image that I'm just going over fast, but these are our final attempt where we actually got down lower into the gorge than I think anyone had been before, because according to the text, we rappelled down, as you can see here, to the base of a falls where a great portal appeared, just as it described in the text, but as you can see by the scale of the figure on the left looking out over at that hole in oval-like tunnel in the wall, impossible to reach through the seething waters. But all of this is very par for the course, of course. I mean, the symbolism of waterfalls and caves behind waterfalls, this idea of interdimensional spaces, all of this is integral to the mandala of Vajrayogini, Vajravarahi. And again, the form that Padmasambhava takes in this riding on the back of a tigress with eyes all over his body, this particular form of Padmasambhava, allowing one imaginally to be able to transcend habitual perceptions and to enter into a greater sense of possibility. So all of this kind of ends with the very nature of what are these pilgrimage places? Are they only in remote parts of the Himalayas, or are also part of our everyday experience? So the Kala Chakra of Tantra guides us into that, saying these places of pilgrimage are omnipresent. The whole cosmos is a pilgrimage site, as is the individual. So here we just see in a simple sentence how the inner, the outer, the secret, and the innermost secret are all deeply connected as a space rather than a place, as a state of awareness rather than a place. And I wanted to end with one of the Mahasiddhas, Jana Dakini Siddharajni. He says, don't seek an outer refuge. The body itself is a divine mandala. Don't look elsewhere for the deity. The mind itself, unborn and unperishing, is the ultimate Buddha and teacher. So if any of you are interested more, the book that I wrote about called The Heart of the World with varying covers is actually down at the book counter below, and I think in various bookstores here. So we will end there, and my apologies for having gone a bit over time.